Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we have the Yokomo SP-03DV2 servo in his drift car, and we've got the programmer, which is SP-USBP. So this is the Yokomo programmer for this servo. So let's bring him for a close-up look. We'll have a look at what the settings are on it, where to get the software from, and see how we go setting this thing up to read the servo. Right, so we've got us a little programmer, but first thing we're going to need to do is get the actual software itself. So you're going to want to open a web browser, and I'll post this link in the description below, and then we're going to choose somewhere for it to live. So for me, let's have a look what we've got. I'm going to go to desktop. I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to make a Yokomo folder, and then we're going to tell it to save the file. So it's just Yokomo underscore v0.7, and we're going to tell it to save that. Once it's saved it, we should be able to go to his desktop, open as folder. You're going to want to right click on this, so you're going to want to go extract all. Then you can delete your original zip folder that it downloaded. If we go into this, you should have the Yokomo v0.7, and if you double click that, you get a warning. If you click more info and run anyway, and then we should have as programming software. So next we're going to need to get the RC and the servo connected, so let's get that done. So the absolute first thing you're going to want to do when you're programming these servos is remove your actual servo arm, and there's a reason this is very important, because these servos can move 360 degrees, and when you're messing around programming, sometimes they randomly just start spinning. You do not want it trying to break the servo or its servo arm. So that's the first thing you're going to want to do. Next, let's find a servo plug. So we're going to want to disconnect it from our receiver. Then you've got the grey wire, which is your signal wire, and you're going to want to plug that into the adapter. So once we've got that connected, we should have as arm removed. We should have the grey wire to our S pin, and then we're just going to have to find a way of moving this around so I can get a servo plugged in. So let's make a little bit of room. I would have liked to see this have an extension, but apparently that's not the way we're going with this. So once we connect it, it's going to be a bit difficult to show, but let's see if I can get it in shot. So this is about the best I can do, but you should just be able to see the green light flashing, and then on the screen you have a tick on the USB. So if we then go to read, so it's successfully read. These are as parameters to start with. So your servo reverse is pretty self-explanatory. The neutral width, the description they give for that is that a lower value gives a more direct characteristic control of the servo, and a higher value gives a milder characteristic for really high grip surfaces. So a starting value is 11, but you can back it down if you want more response from the servo. So if you feel like it's a little bit lazy or slow to respond when you're coming off of central position, you can back this figure down. The anti-shake, basically pretty self-explanatory. If the servo is hunting a lot because of your gyro, you can change the value of this. So an excessive increase of this will result in reduced movement of the servo. So if we have the anti-shake really high, it'll feel like there's not much movement on the servo at all. So the lower you can get this to work with your gyro, the more direct feel it's going to sort of give you and the more sort of movement in your servo. But if you back this off to the point where your servo's sort of twitching and hunting all the time, you're going to want to increase this back up. The definitions of these are a little bit strange. So, power, adjust the power output of the servo. The higher power, the higher the servo torque, but the more current it consumes. So power adjusts torque, so the higher you give it, the more torque it's got. I believe the way this is worded, I believe the power is torque where your servo's moving, so where you're telling the servo where to go, and then the actual torque setting changes the hold amount of torque. So the amount of sort of resistance the servo's got once it's at its position. So if you want to think of those as the power is the amount moving the position, and torque setting is the amount resisting it being pushed back. So if your wheels get forced back, it's your servo resisting it, if that makes sense. But the rest of it, pretty self-explanatory. Reads the settings off your servo. Write will write the settings to the servo. Open will let you open where you've got your settings saved. So if you want to save your stock settings, we can go to save. And then if we go to his desktop, and then we should be able to find his Yokomo folder. So if we just type stock and save, so we've constantly got his stock settings saved. And if I come off here, so we've got a stock setting. So that means if you've tested it and you like how it works, but you want to play about with these, you can mess around with any of these till your heart's content. Once you've got the settings how you want, you'd press write to write it back to the servo. But if you try that and you think, I really don't like it, I want to go back to stock, once you've clicked save and created the stock one, you can click open, and then if we go all files, and it looks like it doesn't actually work. So I've had this with Wtf Rc servos before, and it's quite an easy fix to it. So if you go in, you rename it to stock.svo, I believe it is. Press enter, go back in here, click open, and then it can see your stock settings. Bit of a strange one. I don't know why the program doesn't save it as an SVO file, but basically we double click on that and we've got all the settings back. So a quick recap of it. Read will successfully read parameters from your servo. Write will write them back. So if we've got as settings and we want to play about with them, so we'll turn this down. Not really sure why you can't use them or that. But basically you can drag this setting. So if we change this and we change that down, and we move all them, and you get them where you want, and then you write it back to the servo. If we then want to put a servo back to normal, we can press open, we can go on a stock file, we can click write, and now that's put a servo back to exactly as it was when it arrived. And if you want to check, you can press read, and we can see that the settings have stayed exactly as they are. And finally, UPF is for firmware updates. I've not yet seen any firmware updates for servos from Yokomo, but if you do get a servo file, you can click that and it'll update the servo. Then if we read, yeah, it's still got a stock settings even after we've updated it. And if you want to make sure, you can go open, click into it, and write. and you know you've got your stock settings. So the UPF, the way I believe this works is if Yokomo release a new version of this, it will have the firmware built in, and you just click UPF and it will update the firmware of the actual servo. Then you can press read, make sure you've still got your settings. The only thing that I would suggest doing, because it'll just make your life easier, is if you've got some settings that you prefer. So let's change these randomly. So if these are the settings you prefer, click save and then give it a name. So we'll put test and then just put .svo on the end, and then if you wanted to load them back up, you can see them rather than going in and renaming the file. It'll just save it. Doesn't matter if the .svo is upper or lowercase, as long as it's the last thing on the name. Doesn't matter if the name is upper and lowercase. Just as long as you've got .svo, you will always be able to load your settings back up in it. Bit of a weird one. Wtf Rc servos work same, so I'm guessing it's just a legacy from the way Wtf Rc branded servos are programmed. But yeah, at any point, click read, you can see your settings, and I've given you a quick description of what they do. So that's all programmed and set up. All you have to do is close the program, disconnect your USB, and then fasten your servo arm back on and plug your servo back in. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It's quite straightforward, quite easy to use. But yeah, let's wrap this one up. So there we have it, the SPG or SP-USBP or whatever they want to name this thing. But that's the servo programmer. I will leave the link to the actual software for this in the description, because it can be a bit of a pain to find. There are a couple of sites that sell it that have quite usefully put the software link, but a lot of places don't. And yeah, the only thing I wish it had got an adapter with it for a bit longer, because they've got a really short cable on these servos, so it does make it a little bit awkward. But you can get USB extensions and you can get servo extensions, which I've probably got kicking around somewhere. Maybe should have found a few of them out. But very straightforward to set. From top to bottom, your first power setting is the power where you're telling the servo where to go, or the gyro is. The second torque setting is for its holding torque, and then you've got the neutral width that'll make it more or less responsive, and the anti-shake. Same with that, if you have the anti-shake turned up too much, you'll reduce the amount of movement in the servo altogether. But yeah, nice that it's programmable, easy to use once you've got the software. Just remember to save your original settings, or save your favourite settings as well, and put the .svo on the end of them, and then the actual software will realise that your settings when you want to load them back up. Other than that, it won't see them, which yeah, that could do a bit of work, but it's been the same for all the Wtf Rc ones. So but yeah, hopefully you find that useful or entertaining. But don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.